welcome again. And today we'll proceed with the remaining part of what we have left. Just I'll attach this. Clearly audible to all of you. Now, this time it would be clear to you the text. This is where we stopped in the last class, where we were describing what is patriarchal society and what is feminist. There was this definition given here. Now, there are some figures for us to contemplate that the literacy rate among women in is only 54% compared with 76% among men. So not many women are having access to education in India. That is something very worrying. When we look at school results, girls perform as well as boys, if not better in some places. When we look at school results, girls perform as well as boys, if not better in some places. But they drop out because parents prefer to spend their resources for the boys' education rather than spending equally on their sons and daughters. This is a fact. In fact, the UPSC form, there is no fees for girl aspirant, but maybe 100. I can't recall. In my time, it was 100. Maybe it's 150 or 200 now for boys. It's not a single penny is charged for women. And one of the main reasons why girl used to drop out because as it's written in the text that parents were very conspicuous, very apprehensive about sending girls to school. But she will be better engaged into some household work. This was the prevailing wisdom of parents. And one more thing that there was no toilet facility in the school. So imagine a girl child spending from morning 8 to maybe 1 or 2 in the afternoon without washroom. So that would be a big torture for guys. Guys have this tendency. It's not a very good habit, but then they can have they can do it in open or under the shades. Girls cannot take the nature's call there. So that was the lack of washroom was one of the major reasons for girls dropping out of the school. That is why there is so much emphasis on Swachh Bharat on making the washrooms. It has increased the enrollment of girl students and the and of also increased the enrollment. And one more thing, that the dropout rate has decreased after this washrooms were built. So this reason is not given here, I just added to it. So no wonder the proportion of women among the highly paid and valued job is still very small. Yes, when you are unable to give primary education to the girl child, there will not be many women in the high paying jobs and high valued jobs. There will always be a small number. The Equal Remuneration Act 1976 provides that equal wages should be paid to equal work, irrespective of gender. However, in almost all areas of work, from sports and cinema to factories and fields, women are paid less than men, even when both do exactly the same work. Again, we need to take this with a pinch of salt, a bucket of salt. Equal wages should be paid to equal work. Yes, and then they are talking about sports, cinema, factories. Now, if women cricket is not attracting same number of audience as men cricket, then why would the remuneration be the same? Let the customer, that is the audience, decide whether they are interested into male cricket or female cricket. You, in the name of gender justice, you cannot allow people to watch something they don't want to watch. At times, I don't feel like watching men cricket also, especially after 2011. I don't watch cricket. So can someone ask me that no, you are doing injustice? So we have to. That's why I said we need to take this up with a pinch of salt. Now they talk about cinema. Now there are several movies in there are in many movies in Hindi films. I'll tell you there are many female characters. One movie will have 3 to 4 lead actresses. Do they get the same remuneration? No, they get remuneration as per their roles, and more than that, as per their star value. So of course, for equal pay to equal work must be there. Then how do you define equal work? How do you define equal work is something that we need to ponder upon more. As I told you, in the same movie, there will be 3 to 4 actresses. Not everyone is paid equally. So in many parts of India, parents prefer to have sons and find ways to have the girl child aborted before she is born. Now, this is something very, worrying trend. This is a worrying trend. So, sex selective abortion led to a decline in child sex ratio in the country to merely 919. Now, it has improved for the better. It is, I guess, 2011. Of late, the Beti Padhao, the largely scheme by the central government, and of course, other schemes by the respective state governments in India have arrested this gender gap. This was something very worrying when we were killing the girl child because just because she's a girl. So this has been checked. You see the decimal Haryana, it was 800 something. Now it has improved to 900 plus, and it is improving for better. So initiatives have borne results, if not fully, then to certain extent. There are reports of various kinds of harassment, exploitation, and violence against women. Urban areas have become particularly unsafe for women. They are not safe even within their own home from beating, harassment, and other forms of domestic violence. To some extent, this is largely true, and it's a sad state of affairs that we are unable to protect women in the public domain, even in their own house. They are very vulnerable, beating, harassment, and other forms of domestic violence. And the worst part is that they are not able to articulate the same. Okay, they have this hesitation to say, talk about these things. So unless and until we are able to address the issue, we will never be able to find the solutions. So in India, the proportion of women in legislature has been very low. Now this Lok Sabha is having the highest number of women ever in India. So as I told you, that things are gradually, slowly improving. Now make it legally binding to have a fair proportion of women in elected bodies, Panchayati Raj. But then Panchayati Raj already has a provision of one-third reservation to women. But I told you about Sarpanch Pati. IJPA General pointed out that there is a band of husbands who are ruling under the wheel of their wives. It's the panchayat, the sarpanch is a woman, but her husband takes all the call. He is the one who decides everything. So, is reservation translating into empowerment? Again, we need to ponder over it a bit more. It's not like every time the concerned reservation will translate into empowerment. At least the panchayat experiment does not show this. Activists have been demanding one-third seats should be in Lok Sabha and State Assembly should be given to women. But as I told you, bill is pending, and we have our apprehensions that whether this reservation will translate really into empowerment. So these are the things that are given here. Now, religion, communism, and politics. Now, let us start from here that Gandhiji used to say that religion can never be separated from politics. Yes, he probably believed in that. He meant a dharmic type of politics. And women's movement has argued that family laws of all religion discriminate against women. We have discussed this regarding triple talaq, sati, and everything. The inheritance right among Hindus, which was uh, compensated for only after the intervention of the government. So, what is communalism? Now, let us try to read this, and I'll explain you something more which is important here. Communal politics is based on the idea that religion is the principal basis of social community. It involves thinking along the following lines: the follower of a particular religion must belong to one community. Their fundamental interests are same. Okay, any difference that they may have is irrelevant or trivial for community life. So all the Hindus must come together, all the Muslims must come together. Their being Hindu and their Muslim is of sole importance. The street that is running in front of their house, it's not a pakka road, it's a kacha road, it's a badly maintained street. This is of no value. This is not worth discussing upon. You're not getting access to quality education. This is not worth discussing on. What matters is that you are Hindu, you are Muslim. This is what it says. That fundamental interests are same. Any difference that may have is irrelevant and trivial. So those who believe into these, they are into the communalism. Now, this belief is actually fundamentally flawed. Why? People of one region do not have the same interest or aspiration in every context. Not all Hindus believe equally for everything. Okay, not all Muslims largely believe into everything that it's a community feeling, so we should do it. So everyone has several other roles apart from the religious identity. We all have some other identity as well. But when you emphasize upon that religious identity and you everything in your life revolves around your religion and religious fulcrum, then it takes shape of communalism. And you tend to forget everything on the basis of religion. Oh, he has done wrong, but he belongs to my religion. He's a co-religionist, so I'll forgive him. Someone has not done a very big mistake, but he comes from some other religion, so let's punish him. This is communalism, holier than thou. Now, in form of politics, what it takes uh, routinely involves religious prejudice, stereotypes of religious communities, and beliefs in the superiority of one religion over the other religions. Now, this we have seen many times. Communal mind often leads to a quest for political dominance for ones over other religious communities, and political mobilization on religious line is another frequent form of communalism. This involves the use of sacred symbol, religious leaders, emotional appeal, and plain fear in order to bring the follower of one religion together in the political arena. That we will be annihilated, we are being targeted, so we must come together. Sometimes communism takes the most ugly form of communal violence, riots, and massacres. So these are the various manifestations of communalism that is given in the class 10th NCERT. There is more to it, but we should not discuss these things while we are discussing NCERTs. Let us confine ourselves to NCERTs. Secular, it's an antonym for communal. And what is secularism? In India, it says that the state will have no official religion. Okay, like Buddhism in Sri Lanka, Islam in Pakistan, there is no official religion in India. All individuals, Constitution provides to all individuals and communities freedom to profess, practice, and propagate any religion. You are free to do that, or you may not choose to follow anything. Constitution prohibits discrimination on grounds of religion. No one will be discriminated on the basis of. You have remember that RRCSP. So one of the R was religion. Constitution allows the state to intervene in matters of religion in order to ensure equality within religion communities. Article 17 bans untouchability. Triple talaq is banned. Sati pratha is banned. Hindu women are entitled to equal share in their parental property. These are the glaring examples where constitution has allowed the state to intervene in the matters of religion in order to ensure equality within religious community. So if there is some inequality as per the religious texts, as per the followers of those religious texts, the interpreters of those religious texts, then government, that is the one which is done by the constitution, will come to the rescue. So secularism is not just an ideology of some parties, it constitutes the very foundation of our country. This is how we have always been since time immemorial. Now there is something more like caste inequalities. So caste division is very special to India. Societies have some kind of fault lines, but in India, caste fault line is very unique. So it is based on exclusion of and discrimination against the outcast group, okay, who were subjected to the inhuman practice of untouchability. We have seen this in last NCERT. Now, Jyotiba Phule, Ambedkar, Periyar, Gandhiji, they did much work regarding the upliftment of those who were called low caste, or so-called low caste. So, due to their effect, and again, large-scale urbanization happened. Urbanization is a phenomena where people from villages are moving to cities. So, this has checked casteism. How it has checked casteism? I'll tell you the example. Just you have already read that, so I'll give you substantiate it with some more example which is not in the book. In villages, the caste hierarchies are very rigid. Like the priest, the pandit, he will always be in the temple, and all his next generation will become pandit. Now, whether they are interested in becoming a pujari is immaterial. They have to do that. Now, someone who is into farming, all the kids, the next generation will be into farming. Maybe he's interested in reading the Shastra, the Vedas. Maybe he can become a better Pandit than the actual Pandit who is not interested. Maybe someone born into a Brahmin family is interested in music, but he cannot touch the musical instrument because of the rigid caste hierarchies. Okay, someone who is a farmer will always remain a farmer. He cannot do something else. He cannot become an entrepreneur. That would be something reserved for the Banya, the Vaishya Varna. So these are the caste hierarchies. Once you leave your village, you come to the urban area, then these caste hierarchies are not so rigid. You can do whatever you wish. So urbanization has diluted caste hierarchies for sure because of the education, literacy, occupational mobility. Okay. and the weakening of position of landlord in villages, the old notion of caste hierarchies are breaking down. Now, gone are the eras of, if you see any 70s or 80s Hindi movie, you will see a Thakur in a village being very, very cruel. So, gone are those days. Those fault lines have changed. The narration has changed. The discourse has largely changed. Now, they don't have the same influence, those headmen and the Thakurs, landlords in the villages. So again, the hierarchies are breaking, and when they are coming to town with the growth of urbanization, what else grows? Literacy grows, educational level grows. So no one questions them that why are you doing this? Whatever you choose to decide, you can do that, irrespective of your caste. This is how it should be. So Constitution of India prohibits any caste-based discrimination and laid the foundation of policies to reserve the injustice of the caste system. Now, how it has come into politics that we will see here. Parties choose candidate in election. They keep in mind the caste of the electorate, that this particular seat has this many caste of people, particular caste is there. So I'll give ticket to the same caste who is dominating into this particular constituency. So all the parties do that, and this is how we perpetuate caste inequality. Political parties and candidates in elections make appeal to caste sentiments to muster support. Yes, they do that. Some political parties are known to favor some caste and as seen as their representative. Now, I would not name it here. Uh, it's there in the optional political parties, and there we have to study all the terms, the Ajgar, the Majgar, the MY. Now, what these things are, that let us wait for our political parties in optional political science. Universal adult franchise and the principle of one person, one vote compelled political parties to gear up the task of mobilizing and securing political support. It also brought new consciousness among the people of caste that they were hitherto treated as inferior. No, before this universal adult franchise, those who were treated as low and inferior, they got a new empowerment that no, I do also have a vote. My vote also counts. I have a say in deciding the government of India or the government of my state. So now political parties are after that because he is a vote bank. Okay, he becomes important. So this has given significance to those people who were very downtrodden. Universal and franchise. No parliamentary constituency in the country has a clear majority of one single caste. Yes. So every candidate and party needs to win the confidence of more than one caste to win elections. No party wins the votes of all voters of a caste of community. Very few can manage that. And people say that caste is a vote bank of one party. It usually means that a large proportion of the voters from the caste vote for that party. I'll give you one example. BSP, Bhujan Samaj Party, led by Madam Mayawati in Uttar Pradesh. Uh, Partly fully based in Uttar Pradesh. It has branches in other states also. So basically, it is said to be a party of Dalits. But then not every Dalit in UP voted for Mayawati. If it had been the case, BJP would not have swept the elections in UP, both in Lok Sabha and then in Vidhan Sabha, where Yogi Adityanath ji became the chief minister. So yes, most of the Dalits, or maybe an important, significant number of Dalits in UP vote for BSP, but then not all. That is what is written here. It usually means that a large proportion of voters from that caste vote for that party. Many political parties may put up candidates from the same caste to uh, which dominates the electorate. So you see here, I did not want to talk about it here, but then this cartoon says something else. Now you see, this is Mr. Rambilas Paswan, the one sitting. He is unlocking the SC/ST vote bank. Now this is VP Singh. VP Singh was the prime minister who implemented Mandal Commission. So he has opened the unlocked the Muslim vote bank. Now here is the Kurmi vote bank. Kurmi is an OBC in North India or Hindu. Yadav is an OBC, you must be aware of it. Then there is Lohar and again an OBC. Koiri again an OBC. Rajput upper caste. So you see here the Mr. Lal Krish Advani here. So what he is doing, he was doing in the vote bank of India. He was putting all these OBCs and Rajputs, which means upper caste, in the same Hindu category. Okay, so this is what it is alleged on Advani, and here is Vajpayee, probably the ones who were representing BJP, that they tend to do away with caste with religion by bringing all the caste together as Hindus. and they pit against the Muslims and Christians. This is what is alleged. And then there are other caste leaders who are. So this was in India Today book of cartoons by Ajit Ninal. So he has summed it up in this frame. Now the ruling party and the sitting MP of MLA frequently lose election in our country. Yes, this is happening. So it's not like always someone can take the electorate for granted based on caste or religion. So now you see issues have come. People are talking about development. People are talking about several other things. Caste and religion has taken a back seat, maybe, or maybe some other issues have combined with it that will shall decide in the optional paper. Each caste group tries to become bigger by incorporating within it neighboring caste or subcaste which was earlier excluded from it. Now, Kurmi and Koidi, they tend to be the same, but at times there are differences. But when it comes to electoral politics, then they come together as one vote bank. Various caste groups are required to enter into a coalition with other caste or communities and thus enter into a dialogue and negotiation. Again, these are things which we cannot explain with examples over here. You have to wait for these things to unfold in front of you. So the basic crust of the chapter is done. We have seen how caste, gender, religion, everything plays a role in Indian polity, and how these things have shaped up over a period. Now the situation has changed. I'm not saying these things are done away with. I'm only saying that the situation has changed. So the contemporary analysis is beyond the scope of class 10th NCERT. Let us wait for the opportune time to discuss about these things in great details. Until then, please keep reading, keep revising, and taking good care of yourself. So we'll meet again. We'll meet tomorrow. We'll discuss the next chapter. Bye.